A poor teenage boy saves every penny for 2 weeks to buy a Christmas Eve dinner for his grandmother. But when he spots an elderly couple stranded in the snow with no money to pay for their meal, he gives up everything he has to help them, unaware that the couple are secretly billionaires testing his kindness. What happens next will turn his small act of generosity into a chain of events that transforms an entire town and proves that real wealth has nothing to do with money. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. Snow had been falling since before sunrise, soft and lazy at first, then heavier, faster, until the little town of Hollow Pine looked like someone had shaken a snow globe and forgotten to stop. The streets were quiet now. Christmas was 3 days away, but the only place still awake this early was the narrow diner at the corner of Maple and 3rd, its neon sign flickering faintly through the storm, Hollow Pine Diner. Inside, 18-year-old Eli Thompson was up to his elbows in dishwater, sleeves rolled past his thin arms, steam fogging the window in front of him. The clatter of plates and the hiss of the coffee machine filled the empty room like an orchestra of routine. He'd been working here since spring, 2 shifts on weekdays, 3 on weekends, $8 an hour, no tips. It wasn't much, but it kept the lights on in the small house he shared with his grandmother, Nana Ruth. Every time he plunged his hands into the hot water, he thought of the same thing. Christmas Eve dinner. He'd been saving for it for 2 whole weeks, every coin, every crumpled dollar bill tucked into a jar behind the flour tin at home. He didn't want gifts. He didn't want a tree. All he wanted was to buy one decent meal, a roasted chicken, a small pie, maybe even a bottle of sparkling cider, and have dinner with Nana like they used to before her health went bad. The diner smelled like burnt bacon and cheap coffee, but to Eli it smelled like survival. Big Frank, the cook, shuffled behind him, flipping pancakes with the same rhythm every morning. "You're in early again, kid," Frank grumbled. "Couldn't sleep," Eli said, scrubbing faster. "Your old lady okay?" Eli nodded. "She's fine, just tired lately." Frank didn't push. Everyone in Hollow Pine knew about Nana Ruth, the widow who used to bake pies for the church and teach Sunday school until her heart got weak and her joints started to lock. She still smiled every time she saw Eli off to work though. "You bring the sunshine with you, baby," she always said, even on mornings when she could barely get out of bed. By the time the first regulars stumbled in, truckers in flannel coats, mailmen shaking snow off their boots, Eli had already wiped the counters twice and reset the salt shakers. He liked things neat. It made him feel like maybe, in some small way, he was keeping chaos from winning. At 8 a.m., the door chimed, and a blast of icy wind swept through. Eli looked up and caught his reflection in the window, messy dark hair, tired eyes, and a half-smile that didn't quite reach. He looked older than he was. Life had a way of speeding up when you didn't have anyone else to lean on. After the breakfast rush, he clocked out and started the long walk home. The world outside was all white, snowbanks piled high against fences, Christmas lights glowing faintly under frost. He passed the church, its steeple half buried, and the little grocery store where he bought discounted bread on Mondays. 3 blocks down, he paused in front of the pawn shop. In the window sat a second-hand scarf, navy blue with silver threads woven through it. Price tag, $14.99. He stared at it for a long time. Nana would love that, he thought. But that was half the cost of dinner. He exhaled, fog clouding the glass, then turned away. When he reached home, his boots left wet prints on the wooden porch. The house looked smaller in winter, paint peeling, porch light dim, roof sagging under snow. Inside, the air smelled faintly of peppermint tea and the lemon balm Nana liked to keep by her chair. She was there, as always, wrapped in a blanket, the oxygen tube tracing a fragile line across her cheeks. "There's my handsome boy," she said, her voice soft but bright. "You look frozen. Sit down, baby. I warmed some soup." "It's okay, Grandma. I'll eat later." She squinted, the way she did when she knew he was lying. "You've been saying later for a week." "I'm fine," he said again, then forced a grin. "Besides, I've got plans, big ones." "Plans? For Christmas Eve?" He tried to sound casual, but his heart sped up. "I'm buying dinner this year." Nana's eyes softened, but there was worry behind the smile. "Oh Eli, you don't have to do that. I want to. You deserve it. Baby, we have soup and we have each other. That's more than some folks got." "I know," he said, but the idea of giving her one good meal burned inside him like a promise. That night, after she fell asleep, Eli sat by the window with a notepad and a calculator. He counted the crumpled bills again, $38 and some change, enough if he was careful. The world outside the window was pure white, street lamps haloed by falling snow. Somewhere in the distance, faint bells chimed from the church tower. He wrote at the top of the page, Christmas Eve dinner plan. Underneath, chicken tid, $12, pie $9, scarf maybe, $15. He circled the last one, then drew a small heart beside it. Before bed, he looked in on Nana again. She was sleeping peacefully, her breathing shallow but steady. The room was lit only by the glow of the Christmas lights strung along the window, a string Eli had found in the attic and repaired bulb by bulb. He whispered, "Hang on, Grandma. Just a few more days." Outside, the snow fell harder, thick and relentless, coating the small town in silence. The world was cold, but inside that little house on Elm Street, a boy with rough hands and tired eyes was still believing that kindness, and maybe a little faith, could make miracles happen. By late evening, the storm had turned vicious. Wind howled through Hollow Pine like a living thing, rattling windows and piling snow against the diner door. Inside, the light was soft and golden, the kind of light that made even worn-out booths look almost inviting. Eli stood behind the counter wiping the same mug for the 5th time, not because it needed it, but because it kept his hands busy. His shift should have ended an hour ago, but the buses had stopped running, and walking home in that whiteout was asking to freeze. Only 3 customers remained, a pair of truckers arguing about football and Mrs. Callahan who came every Christmas Eve since her husband died. The radio in the corner played an old Bing Crosby song through a crackling speaker. Outside, the world was nothing but wind and snow. Eli glanced at the clock, 8:47 p.m. If the storm let up soon, he could still make it home before midnight. He had everything ready for tomorrow, the roasted chicken pre-ordered, the pie reserved, and the little blue scarf still waiting in the pawnshop window. Tomorrow was supposed to be perfect, a small quiet Christmas Eve with Nana Ruth. Then the door opened, and the bell chimed. A blast of icy air swept through the diner, scattering napkins and sending a shiver through the room. 2 figures stepped in from the storm, an elderly couple soaked through, snow clinging to their coats. The man was tall, thin, with sharp blue eyes and a silver watch chain glinting at his vest. The woman beside him was shorter, her white hair pulled back in a bun, pearls peeking from under her scarf. They looked out of place here, like people who belonged in a country club, not a roadside diner. "Evening," Eli said automatically, reaching for menus. "You folks all right?" The woman smiled weakly. "We seem to have had some trouble with our car. We've been walking for miles. Just some coffee, please." Eli nodded, coming right up. They slid into booth 4, near the window, shivering as they peeled off their gloves. Snow dripped from their sleeves onto the red vinyl seat. Eli poured 2 steaming mugs and brought them over, sugars in the jar, creams on the table. "Thank you, son," the man said, his voice calm but precise, each word measured. He looked at Eli longer than necessary, like he was memorizing him. When Eli turned away, he caught Big Frank at the kitchen pass-through shaking his head. "Don't they look loaded?" Frank muttered. "Bet they've got a Benz out there, probably forgot to check the gas." "Maybe," Eli said. "Or maybe they just had a rough night," Frank grunted. "Rich folks don't have rough nights." 10 minutes passed. The couple sat in silence, whispering to each other. When the check came, the woman opened her purse, rifling through it once, then again, faster this time. A nervous tremor crept into her hands. "Henry," she whispered, "it's not here." The man checked his coat pockets, his expression tightening. "You must have dropped it." "I had it when we left the house." Eli tried not to listen, but the diner was small, their voices carried. The woman's cheeks flushed red as she turned to him. "I'm terribly sorry, dear, but we seem to have misplaced our wallet. Could we perhaps?" Before she could finish, Big Frank lumbered out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "Sorry folks, we can't do tabs, not tonight, manager's rule." The woman's face fell. "We understand." The man stood, straightening his soaked coat with quiet dignity. "Come, Margaret, we'll manage." They started toward the door. The wind outside screamed through the crack as Henry pushed it open, and the sound of it, cold and lonely, seemed to echo straight through Eli's chest. He looked down at the plate in his hands, the special meal he'd asked Frank to set aside before closing. The one he was supposed to take home to share with Nana. Roasted chicken, potatoes, pie. He hesitated only a second. Then he called out, "Wait," they stopped. The woman turned, her eyes rimmed red. Eli crossed the diner, tray in hand. "Please, take this." "Oh no dear, we couldn't possibly." "You can," he interrupted gently. "It's Christmas Eve." The man's gaze sharpened. "That's your dinner, isn't it?" Eli forced a smile. "I'll eat when I get home. My grandma's got soup." For a long moment, the old man said nothing. Then he nodded slowly, as if deciding something. "Thank you. What did you say your name was?" "Eli." He extended a hand, steady, strong. "Henry, this is my wife Clara." Clara's grip was soft, trembling. "You've given us more than food tonight, Eli." "It's nothing," he said. "Just a meal." "No," Henry said quietly. "It's character." Eli didn't know what to say to that. He just smiled, stepped back, and motioned toward the booth. "Sit, eat while it's warm." As they sat down again, the storm outside rattled the windows so hard the glass hummed. Frank muttered something under his breath, but Eli didn't hear. He was watching the couple, how they leaned toward each other, how Clara's eyes softened as she took the first bite. From behind the counter, he could see them sharing the pie, small pieces at a time, like they were stretching the moment. When they finally stood to leave, Henry reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a gold pocket watch. For a second he turned it over in his hands, then slipped it back. "I wish I could repay you, son." "You already did," Eli said. "You reminded me what Christmas is supposed to feel like." Clara smiled at that, tears glistening in the corner of her eyes. She slipped a folded napkin onto the table before walking out into the snow. The doorbell jingled once, twice, then silence. Eli didn't notice the napkin until after they were gone. He picked it up absently, planning to toss it, but something written on it caught his eye, in delicate slanted handwriting. "Kindness is currency. You've just made your first investment." He stared at the words for a long time, the storm still raging outside, and felt something he couldn't name, a quiet certainty that tonight wasn't over yet, and that somehow, this small act would matter more than he could possibly imagine. The diner closed just after midnight. The storm hadn't let up. If anything, it had grown meaner, snow slashing sideways across the parking lot, wind howling like it wanted to peel the roof off. Eli stacked the last of the chairs onto tables, wiped down the counter, and glanced again at the napkin sitting by the register. He'd read the words a dozen times already, but they still felt strange. "Kindness is currency. You've just made your first investment." It didn't sound like something people actually said. It sounded like a riddle. Or maybe a warning. Frank emerged from the back, grabbing his coat. "Storm's not quitting." "You walking home?" "Yeah." "You're crazy, kid. Streets'll eat you alive tonight." Eli shrugged. "No buses, I'll manage." Frank eyed him a moment, then handed him an extra scarf from the lost and found box. "Don't be a hero." "Merry Christmas, all right." Eli smiled faintly. "Merry Christmas." He stepped outside, and was swallowed by white. The snow was knee-deep in some places, and the wind bit through his jacket like teeth. The main road was deserted, no headlights, no sound except the crunch of his boots. He pulled the scarf tighter and kept walking. Halfway home, near the bend by the old gas station, something flickered in the distance, flashing red and blue lights. He thought it was just the storm playing tricks until he got closer. A car had skidded off the road and slammed into a snowbank. 2 police cruisers and an ambulance sat nearby, their lights painting the blizzard in pulses of color. Paramedics moved briskly, huddled over someone on a stretcher. Eli froze. The car, a silver Mercedes with a shattered grille, looked familiar. He'd seen it just hours ago parked behind the diner. "Hey kid," a paramedic shouted. "Road's closed. You can't be here." Eli nodded, stepping back, but not before he caught sight of something through the open car door, a flash of gold glinting under the seat. The same pocket watch Henry had held earlier. He stood there, heart pounding, as the ambulance doors slammed shut. The siren wailed to life, then disappeared into the white. The other cars followed, leaving the Mercedes half buried in snow. Eli's breath came out in short, ragged bursts. "It can't be them," he thought. "They just left the diner an hour ago." He tried to shake it off. Maybe it was another car. Another couple, but the words on the napkin kept repeating in his head. "Kindness is currency." By the time he reached home, his jeans were soaked and his fingers numb. The little yellow house looked softer under its blanket of snow, like it was trying to keep itself warm. He pushed open the door, and was hit by the smell of peppermint and wood smoke. Nana Ruth was still awake, sitting in her chair with the TV humming softly. The lights from the Christmas tree flickered weakly against the window. "Baby," she said when she saw him. "What on earth took you so long?" "Storm got worse," he said, shaking snow from his hair. "You should have gone to bed." "Couldn't sleep." She nodded toward the stove. "I kept your soup warm." Eli sat on the couch, thawing his hands over the space heater. His reflection stared back from the dark TV screen, pale, tired, older somehow. "Grandma," he said quietly. "You ever feel like something's happening, and you don't know what it means yet?" She smiled faintly. "Every day of my life." He told her about the couple, the lost wallet, the meal, the napkin with its strange message. When he mentioned seeing the crash on the road, her expression turned serious. "Silver Mercedes?" she asked. He blinked. "Yeah, how'd you know?" "Because I heard it on the scanner. Said 2 were taken to the hospital. Critical condition." Eli's stomach twisted. "You think it was them?" Nana looked down at her hands, thin and veined like paper. "Maybe, but you did right by them, baby. Sometimes kindness isn't about outcome, it's about obedience to your heart." He didn't answer. The napkin was still in his pocket, damp now, the ink smudged slightly from melted snow. As the hours stretched past midnight, the storm outside began to ease, the wind softened, the snow drifted slower. Eli sat by the window, watching the world turn white again, clean and silent. Across the street, the lights of the church flickered on. Midnight mass. He could just make out the faint echo of the choir through the glass, singing Silent Night. For a brief moment, he felt it, the stillness, the strange weight of it all, as if something was shifting beneath the surface of his ordinary life. He looked down at the napkin one last time before folding it carefully and tucking it into the back of his wallet. He didn't know why, but some part of him whispered that he should keep it. Outside, the town of Hollow Pine slept beneath its blanket of snow. But somewhere out there, in a hospital room, under fluorescent light, 2 names he didn't yet know were being written beside his, on a list that would change everything. By morning, the storm had broken. The world outside Eli's window looked brand new, white rooftops glittering under a pale sun, snow piled on the porches like thick frosting. The air was so still, it almost didn't feel real, as if the whole town was holding its breath after surviving the night. Inside the little house on Elm Street, the heater hummed weakly. Nana Ruth was already awake, wrapped in her faded shawl, humming an old gospel tune as she poured oatmeal into 2 chipped bowls. "You see that sun, baby?" she said when Eli came out, his hair still damp from a quick shower. "After every storm, it always shows up like it's got something to prove." Eli smiled faintly. "Guess it passed the test." "So did you," she said, handing him his bowl. "You still thinking about that couple?" He nodded, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Can't get them out of my head. I keep wondering if they made it. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Either way, you did what you were supposed to. But what if," he hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of his bowl, "what if I gave everything for nothing?" Nana gave him that look, the one that could stop an argument before it began. "Kindness doesn't ask for return, Eli. It's not a loan, it's a seed." He didn't answer, but her words stuck, like they always did. By noon, he was back at Hollow Pine Diner. Frank had called asking if he could cover the lunch rush. Half the staff was snowed in. The diner was busier than usual, families warming up after church, kids in puffy coats, the smell of coffee and pancakes thick in the air. As Eli stacked dishes behind the counter, the door opened again. The bell jingled. This time, it wasn't customers, it was a man in a black coat, tall, neat, carrying a leather briefcase. He brushed snow from his shoulders and looked around the diner with sharp eyes that didn't seem to miss anything. "Can I help you, sir?" Eli asked. The man approached the counter, his shoes were polished, his voice clipped and precise. "I'm looking for Eli Thompson." "That's me." He studied Eli a moment, as though confirming something. "Good. My name's Mr. Reed, I represent the Whitfield Foundation." Eli frowned. "The what?" "The Whitfield Foundation," the man repeated. "Based in Boston. We handle philanthropy, education, community redevelopment. You've been recommended." Eli blinked. "By who?" "Mr." Reed opened his briefcase and produced a crisp white envelope, sealed with gold wax bearing the foundation's insignia, a crest with interlocking letters, W and F. He set it gently on the counter. "This is for you." Frank poked his head out of the kitchen. You in trouble, kid? Eli shook his head slowly, taking the envelope. The wax glimmered under the diner light. No sir, I don't think so. The man straightened his tie. Mr. Whitfield requests your presence at Hollow Pine High School, noon tomorrow. Don't be late. Then he turned and left, the bell jingling softly behind him, leaving a silence thick enough to hear the hum of the coffee machine. Frank raised an eyebrow. You get a letter from a foundation. Eli looked down at the envelope. Apparently. What's it say? I don't know yet. He broke the seal carefully. Inside was a single card, heavy and expensive, engraved in gold. Dear Mr. Thompson, we cordially invite you to a private meeting regarding an educational and community opportunity of significant value. Please come prepared for a conversation that could change your future. E.W. Henry Whitfield. Eli's stomach dropped. He remembered the sharp blue eyes, the voice calm as winter air, the napkin with its strange message. Kindness is currency. Frank leaned over the counter. Well, what's it say? Eli folded the card and slipped it back into the envelope. It says, I've got a meeting tomorrow. With who? Eli's eyes lingered on the golden initials embossed at the bottom. I think I already met them. That night he couldn't sleep. The words on the invitation glowed in his mind like they were written in light. A conversation that could change your future. At one point he got up, went to his closet, and pulled down the small jar of money he'd been saving for Christmas dinner. He set it on the table and stared at it. He'd planned to spend it on roasted chicken, pie, and maybe the scarf for Nana. But now, somehow, that all felt small, like it belonged to a different version of his life. Nana came out, wrapped in her robe, her gray hair undone. You're pacing holes in the floor, baby. I got a letter today, he said quietly. From the people whose car crashed. Her eyes softened. You think it's good news or bad? I don't know. She reached out, took his hand, then treat it like good until proven otherwise. He laughed under his breath. You always say stuff like that. That's because it works. Before heading back to bed, she turned in the doorway. Whatever this is, Eli, don't let them change who you are. People will test your heart when they can't match your soul. He watched her disappear down the hall, her words hanging in the air like scripture. When he finally sat down, he pulled the napkin from his wallet, smoothing its wrinkles with his thumb. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were still clear. Kindness is currency. You've just made your first investment. For the first time, Eli wondered if it hadn't been a note of gratitude at all. Maybe it was a promise, or a warning. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and slow this time, blanketing Hollow Pine in silence. Tomorrow he would go to the meeting. Tomorrow he'd find out who Henry Whitfield really was, and why a stranger who'd once pretended to be poor was suddenly interested in a dishwasher from Vermont. The next day arrived wrapped in gray clouds and quiet anticipation. Snow still covered the sidewalks in thick, uneven slabs, and the air held that sharp metallic chill that always followed a storm. Eli stood outside Hollow Pine High School, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, staring up at the building that suddenly looked different, like it knew something he didn't. He hadn't slept much. The gold-lettered invitation was still folded neatly in his jacket pocket, the weight of it somehow heavier than paper should be. Inside, the school hallways were silent, except for the faint echo of his boots on tile. The Christmas decorations, the paper snowflakes taped to lockers, the wilted garlands around the office windows, looked tired, like the season itself had run out of energy. The secretary at the front desk didn't look up when he entered. Name? Eli Thompson. I was told to meet someone from the Whitfield Foundation. She glanced up then, her expression softening slightly when she saw him. Ah, they're waiting for you in the auditorium. Down the hall, second door on your left. Eli nodded, thanked her quietly, and walked. He pushed open the auditorium door, expecting rows of chairs, maybe a podium, maybe a single person with a clipboard. Instead he froze. There were 5 people seated on the stage, dressed in immaculate suits and dresses, a long table before them draped in deep blue fabric with the same gold insignia he'd seen on the letter. WF. A single chair waited at the center of the stage facing them, a microphone on the table. At the far end sat Mr. Reed, the man who had delivered the letter yesterday. Next to him, a woman with red lipstick and a tablet. Beside her, an older man with silver hair and a posture that radiated command. Mr. Thompson, Mr. Reed said, rising slightly. Thank you for coming. Please have a seat. Eli hesitated before walking to the chair, feeling every eye follow him. As he sat, the woman with the tablet smiled politely. We appreciate your punctuality. This will be brief. Am I being interviewed for something? Eli asked. His voice sounded too loud in the empty room. Yes, Mr. Reed said smoothly. For an opportunity. Another man at the table leaned forward, his accent clipped and expensive. Tell us, Eli, why do you work? He blinked. Why do I work? Yes, the man said. You're 18. Most teenagers your age would rather be out with friends, not scrubbing dishes in a diner. What drives you? Eli hesitated. He wasn't sure what kind of answer they wanted. My grandma. She's sick, and bills don't stop coming because life gets hard. The woman typed something on her tablet. So it's obligation. No, Eli said quickly. It's love. There was a pause, a flicker of something approval maybe across Mr. Reed's face. The older man with silver hair spoke next, his voice calm but weighted. If you suddenly had enough money to never worry about bills again, what would you do? Eli exhaled, thinking. Fix the roof, get Nana her medicine. Then, he hesitated, then smiled faintly, then maybe do something for this town. It's dying. People act like poverty's contagious, but all we need is someone to believe in us. The man tilted his head. And you think that someone should be you? Eli met his gaze squarely. If no one else will, then yeah, maybe it should. There was a murmur at the table, a few nods, a few scribbles on paper. The red lipstick woman said softly, That's an ambitious answer, Mr. Thompson. He shrugged. Guess I've had to think big in small places. They exchanged quick glances, silent signals that Eli couldn't read. Finally Mr. Reed closed his folder. That will be all, Mr. Thompson. Thank you. He stood confused. That's it, for now. As he turned to leave, he heard the red lipstick woman whisper something to the silver-haired man. Eli caught only fragments. Profile matches perfectly. Emotional authenticity, genuine. He paused at the door, but before he could look back, Mr. Reed's voice stopped him. Mr. Thompson, he said, tone softer now, almost kind. Whatever happens next, remember, there are no coincidences in this life, only choices. Eli nodded slowly. I'll remember that. He walked out into the empty hallway, heart hammering. None of it made sense. Who were these people? Why ask about his dreams, his grandmother, his life? As he stepped outside, the wind cut cold across his face, sharper now, carrying a smell of snow and wood smoke. He pulled his coat tighter and started walking home. At the crosswalk, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Mr. Thompson. The voice was calm, precise. It was Mr. Reed. Yes, there's something you should know. The Whitfields, the couple from the diner, have requested to meet you personally. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Principal's office. Eli froze mid-step. They're alive? Very much so, Reed said. And very interested in you. The line clicked dead. Eli stood there in the middle of Main Street, phone still to his ear, the cold seeping through his gloves. People passed him carrying shopping bags, laughing, their breath visible in the winter air. But all he could think about were those blue eyes across a diner booth, the words on a napkin written in neat cursive, and the faint feeling that his entire life had just taken a turn he couldn't yet see. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the napkin again, and stared at it under the pale December sun. Kindness is currency. You've just made your first investment. For the first time, Eli wondered how big that investment really was, and what exactly it was about to cost him. The next morning broke clear and bitterly cold. The snow that had blanketed Hollow Pine all week now sparkled under a bright sun, but the air outside bit through coats and gloves like glass. Eli walked the 3 blocks to Hollow Pine High, breath clouding in front of him. His nerves wound so tight he could hear his own pulse. He'd hardly slept. The phone call from Mr. Reed replayed in his mind again and again. They're alive, and they want to meet you. The moment he stepped into the front office, the air changed. The secretary, usually cheerful, stood a little straighter. They're waiting for you, Mr. Thompson, she said softly, as if the walls could hear. Through the frosted glass of the principal's office door, Eli could make out 3 silhouettes, Principal Hughes sitting stiffly behind his desk, and across from him, 2 figures that sent a shock through his chest even before he saw their faces. When he stepped inside, time seemed to slow. There they were, Henry and Clara Whitfield, no longer the soaked trembling couple from the storm, no longer desperate travelers. Today they looked like people from another world. Henry wore a tailored charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly combed, his watch gleaming under the morning light. Clara was dressed in a pale blue coat with pearl buttons, a diamond pin catching on her collar. Both of them turned toward him at once, and though their faces softened, their presence filled the room like a quiet command. Principal Hughes stood quickly. Eli, please, have a seat." His tone was oddly formal, almost reverent. Eli sat, his chair creaking slightly. "You're the Whitfields," he said slowly, still trying to process it. "You were at the diner." Henry smiled faintly. "We were." Clara folded her hands. "You gave away your dinner to two strangers that night." "We haven't forgotten." Eli blinked, unsure how to respond. "I just thought you needed it more." "That," Henry said, leaning forward, "is precisely why you're sitting here." Principal Hughes cleared his throat. "The Whitfields are remarkable people, Eli. They run one of the largest philanthropic foundations in the country." Eli turned to them. "So the accident was real enough," Henry said. "Our car skidded off the road, but we weren't seriously hurt. We had paramedics check us out and left the hospital by dawn. We've been meaning to see you since." He exchanged a look with Clara before continuing. "That night was part of an annual initiative we call the Christmas Test, a way of finding people whose character outshines circumstance." Eli's heartbeat stumbled. "A test?" Clara nodded gently. "We've spent the last 3 days in Hollow Pine, observing, asking questions, learning about the people who make this town what it is. Your name came up more than any other." He frowned. "People were talking about me, constantly," Henry said. "The boy who tutors after school, helps his elderly neighbors, works 2 jobs, and still finds time to smile. The one who gave his last meal to strangers." Eli looked down, embarrassed. "That doesn't make me special." "No," Henry said, "but what you did when no one was watching does." Clara reached for her briefcase and placed it on the desk. From inside, she pulled a leather portfolio, the same one she clutched that night in the diner. She opened it carefully and slid a single document across the desk. Eli hesitated before reading. "The Whitfield Foundation, Community Leadership Fellowship." Below that, in smaller letters, "Recipient, Eli Thompson." He looked up. "I don't understand." Henry clasped his hands. "It's an opportunity. Full scholarship to any university you choose, tuition, housing, expenses, all covered by the foundation. In addition, we'd like to train you under our program. You'd learn community development, non-profit management, and return here as a leader when the time is right." Eli's mouth went dry. "That's impossible." Clara smiled softly. "So was finding someone like you." For a moment silence filled the office, thick, heavy, electric. Then Henry said something that made the floor drop from under him. "We're also planning a major redevelopment project here in Hollow Pine, $20 million to transform this town. We want you to be part of it." Principal Hughes exhaled like he'd been holding it in for minutes. "It's a life-changing offer, Eli." But Eli's thoughts were already spinning. "Why me?" Henry didn't blink. "Because transformation has to come from within. Outsiders can fund change, but only locals can lead it, and you've already shown you'd give everything you have for the good of someone else." Eli stared down at the paper, the gold crest shining under the light. The offer didn't feel real. It felt like a story someone might tell about another person, a better version of him. Then his voice broke through the hum of disbelief. "What's the catch?" Henry's smile flickered. "Catch? People don't hand out $1 million scholarships and projects to dishwashers for no reason." Principal Hughes shifted uncomfortably. Clara looked down. Henry studied Eli for a long moment before answering. "The only condition," Henry said slowly, "is that you commit fully. The fellowship requires relocation to Boston for 1 year. Intensive training. You'd be compensated, of course, but it would mean leaving Hollow Pine, leaving your grandmother." Eli's chest tightened. "Leave Nana." Clara's voice was gentle. "She'd be cared for. The foundation would cover her medical expenses, send a nurse if needed. But you can't serve 2 masters, Eli. You must choose the greater mission." Eli leaned back, words tumbling out before he could stop them. "You mean choose between helping my town and helping the one person who kept me alive long enough to get here?" Henry's eyes didn't waver. "Sometimes leadership demands sacrifice. Great change never comes free." Principal Hughes spoke softly. "Eli, I know this is a lot, but these people are offering you a future few could dream of." Eli stood abruptly, the document trembling slightly in his hands. "A test," he muttered. "That's what this still is, isn't it? You're testing how much I'll give up." Henry didn't deny it. "Every choice reveals who we are." For a long moment, nobody spoke. The hum of the radiator filled the room, the faint creak of wood under Eli's shifting weight. Finally Clara stood, her tone almost maternal. Think on it, dear, you don't have to decide now, but know this: what you did that night showed extraordinary character. What you decide next will show destiny. Henry nodded once, formal again. Mr. Reed will contact you tomorrow. We'll need your answer by then. Eli didn't shake hands, he simply nodded, turned, and walked out into the hall. The air outside the office felt thinner, colder. Students hurried past him, laughing, carrying gifts and cards for the last day before break. Their world was still ordinary. His had just fractured in two. He made it halfway down the block before realizing his hands were still clenched around the letter. Above him, church bells began to ring, echoing across the frozen town, a sound that once meant hope, but now felt like a countdown. He stopped under the bare maple trees, snow crunching beneath his boots, and whispered to himself, half in awe, half in fear, "They don't want my gratitude, they want my soul." By the time Eli got home, the sun had dipped low behind the trees, turning the snow outside a soft bruised gold. The little house on Elm Street glowed from the single lamp by the window. It looked peaceful, like the world hadn't just split open. Inside, the air smelled like rosemary and tea. Nana Ruth was in her chair, her knitting half done, the oxygen tube curling around her shoulders like lace. She looked up the moment he stepped through the door. "Baby," she said, her voice warm and thin. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Eli didn't answer right away. He hung up his coat, still clutching the folder the Whitfields had given him. The leather felt heavy, expensive, wrong. "I had another meeting," he said finally. "With who?" He hesitated. "The couple from the diner." "They weren't who they said they were." Nana's hands stilled on her lap. "What do you mean?" "They're billionaires, Grandma. Philanthropists, the kind that build hospitals and put their names on wings of museums." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "And what do they want with you?" Eli sank onto the couch, the folder on his knees. "They offered me a scholarship, full ride college, housing, all of it. But that's not the crazy part." He swallowed hard. "They're planning to rebuild this town, $20 million, and they want me to help lead it." For a heartbeat, silence. Then Nana smiled gently, proud but cautious. "That sounds like a blessing, baby." "Yeah," he said. "Except it comes with conditions." Her eyes narrowed. "There's always conditions. They want me to move to Boston. 1 year of training. They said they'd take care of you, send a nurse, but I wouldn't be here." He rubbed his face. "I don't know what to do." Nana leaned back, the old recliner creaking beneath her. "And what do you want to do?" "I want both," he said quickly. "I want to help this town, and take care of you. I want to make something of myself, but not if it means leaving you behind." He looked up, eyes glinting. "It's like they're asking me to prove I deserve what they're offering, by walking away from everything that made me who I am." Nana's voice softened, but there was steel in it. "Then maybe the question isn't what they're offering, Eli. Maybe it's what they're testing." He shook his head, pacing. "They said every choice reveals who we are. But what kind of people put others in a position like that? What kind of kindness comes with a price tag?" Nana's gaze followed him carefully. "People who think money makes them wise. But money don't measure the heart, baby." He stopped at the window, staring out at the snow drifting down through the streetlight. For a moment he saw his reflection, his tired eyes, the boy who'd worked double shifts and saved for 2 weeks just to buy a meal that he gave away. And now the same people he'd fed were asking him to trade his soul for a seat at their table. "I think I made a mistake," he said quietly. "You made a choice," Nana corrected. "A good one. You fed the hungry. You didn't do it for a reward. But now the reward's real." "Maybe that's the real test," she said. "Seeing if you still remember why you did it in the first place." He turned toward her, eyes stinging. "You always make it sound simple." "It is simple," she said. "Doing the right thing usually is. It's just never easy." He laughed once, dry. "You sound like you already know what I should do." "I'm not you, Eli." Her voice cracked softly. "If leaving me means saving this town, then maybe that's what you're meant to do." "No," he said too quickly. "Don't say that." She smiled, a small aching smile. "Baby, I've lived my life. You're still building yours. Don't waste it waiting for my time to run out." He stared at her, unable to speak. The words hit too close to the bone. Finally she reached over, took his hand in hers, frail but warm. "You remember that napkin you showed me? The one that said kindness is currency?" He nodded. She patted his hand once, gently. Don't spend it all in one place. He didn't understand right away, but he nodded anyway. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, Eli sat at the kitchen table, under the dim yellow light, the portfolio open in front of him. He stared at the documents again, his name printed in elegant type, numbers he could barely comprehend. The words Leadership Fellowship and Redevelopment Initiative. His phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Reed. The Whitfields await your answer tomorrow, 10 a.m. sharp. He typed out half a reply. I can't do it, then erased it. He thought of Nana's hands trembling when she held her teacup, of the leaky roof, of the townspeople who believed nothing would ever change here. And then he thought of Henry's words. Sometimes leadership demands sacrifice. At 2 a.m., he made his choice. He closed the folder, tucked the napkin inside its cover, and packed his single suitcase, the one he used when he'd sleep over at the diner for double shifts. Before leaving his room, he wrote a note and placed it on Nana's nightstand. Grandma, I'll be back soon. I promise, this time I'm going to make it count. The next morning, when she woke and found the note, she didn't cry. She only looked toward the window, where the snow was falling again, and whispered a prayer. Lord, she said softly, watch over my boy. He's walking into a world that knows how to buy kindness but not how to keep it. Outside, a bus rumbled past the sleeping town, its lights cutting through the dawn. Eli sat by the window, coat collar high, the folder clutched tight against his chest. Behind him, Hollow Pine shrank into a blur of snow and memory. Ahead lay Boston, the Whitfields, and a test far greater than any he'd ever imagined. Boston looked nothing like Hollow Pine. It smelled different, salt in the air from the harbor, coffee from every corner cafe, and something metallic, like ambition itself. The buildings were taller, sharper, reflecting the winter sun in sheets of glass and steel, and everywhere Eli turned, people moved with purpose, phones in hand, eyes ahead, like they were late to something important. The Whitfield Foundation occupied the top floors of a tower downtown, all polished marble, and silent elevators. The kind of place where your footsteps sounded too loud, and every reflection reminded you didn't belong. Eli arrived early on his first day, dressed in the only suit they'd given him, a perfect fit, except for how it made him feel. The receptionist smiled politely, but didn't make eye contact. Mr. Thompson, she said, pressing a button on her headset. He's here. Moments later, Mr. Reed appeared, just as precise as always, his tie perfectly centered. Welcome to Boston, Eli. Follow me. He led him down a long hallway, lined with photographs, black and white portraits of community centers, schools, hospitals, each captioned with the same words, the Whitfield Foundation, building character through compassion. They stopped in front of a glass door etched with Henry Whitfield's name. Reed opened it, and gestured inside. Henry stood at the window, looking out over the city. Good morning, son, he said without turning. Quite a view, isn't it? Eli nodded. It's something. Henry finally faced him, that familiar calm in his voice. This city is a living organism. Money is its blood, power its oxygen. But what keeps it alive, what truly makes it breathe, is trust. That's what we're going to teach you. Trust? Eli asked. Henry smiled faintly. Between what people say they believe, and what they're willing to pay for. He motioned for Eli to sit, then handed him a sleek binder labeled Community Partnership Division. You'll shadow me for the next 6 months, learn how projects begin, how funding moves, how influence builds. You'll meet city officials, donors, the people who make things happen. And after that, Eli asked, you'll go home, Henry said simply. You'll lead the Hollow Pine Initiative. But first you need to understand the machinery that makes generosity work. The phrase lingered in Eli's mind all day, the machinery that makes generosity work. The next few weeks blurred together in a rhythm of meetings and spreadsheets. Eli learned how to read grant proposals, analyze budgets, sit through presentations about strategic impact and community ROI. He met people who spoke about kindness the way bankers spoke about profit. He was good at it, too good, Henry noticed. You've got instinct, he said one afternoon after a board meeting, the kind of sincerity money can't buy. Eli smiled awkwardly. Guess sincerity's all I've got. Henry's gaze lingered. Hold on to it, just don't let it blind you. By February, the snow in Boston had turned gray and hard at the edges. Eli had grown accustomed to the hum of the office, the quiet competition that lived beneath the politeness. He worked late, skipped meals, memorized numbers. At night, in his small foundation-funded apartment, he'd call Nana. "How's the city treating you, baby?" she'd ask, her voice soft with static. "It's big," he'd say, loud, "but I'm learning." "You eatin'?" He'd laugh, trying to. Then she'd tell him about Hollow Pine, the church bake sale, the power outage that lasted half a night, the neighbor who shoveled their walkway before dawn. Every detail made his chest ache a little. Sometimes she'd ask, "You still the same boy who gave his dinner to strangers?" And he'd answer, "I hope so." But some nights when he hung up he wasn't so sure. It started small. Eli was reviewing a project proposal, renovating an old community library on the south side of Boston. The numbers didn't add up. He noticed the construction bid came from a company listed under a subsidiary owned by the foundation itself. He brought it to Mr. Reed. "That's intentional," Reed said flatly. "Keeps things efficient, but we're paying ourselves," Eli said. "Isn't that wrong?" Reed adjusted his glasses. "No, it's how we maintain oversight. Welcome to real-world altruism." Later that week he overheard two senior managers joking by the coffee machine about the Christmas kid, their nickname for him. "Every year Whitfield finds one," one said. Guilt with a pulse. Eli walked past without a word, but the laughter burned in his ears. March came, and with it more travel. Henry took him to meetings with donors and city planners. Eli watched as men in expensive suits shook hands over what they called impact zones. It all sounded noble, until you realized they were talking about which neighborhoods would be profitable to save. One evening after a long meeting, Henry invited Eli for a drink at the rooftop lounge. The city glowed beneath them, skyscrapers rising like candles in a field of snow. "You're quiet tonight," Henry said, sipping his whiskey. "I'm just trying to understand," Eli replied. "I thought philanthropy was about helping people." "It is," Henry said smoothly, "but helping people requires power, and power requires strategy." Eli frowned. "Strategy shouldn't mean manipulation," Henry chuckled. "Naivete is a privilege, son. Most people in your position would sell their souls for what you've been given." "Maybe that's the problem," Eli said quietly. For a moment Henry's blue eyes sharpened. "Be careful, Eli. The world doesn't reward purity, it rewards results." By April, Eli had learned too much to unsee it. The Whitfield Foundation's projects weren't all lies. Some truly helped communities, but every act of charity came with a footnote. Land deals, tax breaks, ownership stakes in the redeveloped zones. They disguised control as compassion, branding themselves as saviors while buying influence piece by piece. And now, Eli's own town was next. He found the internal proposal one night while working late. Hollow Pine Redevelopment Initiative. Projected ROI, 14.6% over 5 years. ROI, return on investment. He read deeper. The plan included the demolition of 3 residential blocks including Elm Street, his home, Nana's house. Eli felt the blood drain from his face. He stormed into Henry's office the next morning, the file clutched tight in his hand. "You're bulldozing my neighborhood," he said, voice shaking. "That's not charity, that's theft." Henry didn't look surprised. Progress always costs something. "Not people's homes." Henry sighed, setting down his pen. "Eli, you misunderstand. Those lots are practically condemned. We'll rebuild better homes, better infrastructure, modern, efficient, sustainable. Your grandmother will be relocated, comfortably." Eli slammed the folder onto the desk. "She doesn't need comfort, she needs her home. She needs dignity." Henry's voice hardened. "And what about the hundreds of others who will benefit from this?" "You think small, Eli. That's your weakness." "Small," Eli shot back. "I think human. You think profitable." For the first time Henry's composure cracked. "Don't lecture me about morality. You'd still be washing dishes if we hadn't found you. And you'd still be pretending to care about people if I hadn't seen through you," Eli said. A long dangerous silence stretched between them. Then Henry smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Careful, son. The world doesn't owe you a damn thing. Everything you have we gave you. Remember that." Eli stared at him. "No, you tested me. You never gave. I earned this. Every single bit." He turned and walked out before Henry could answer. That night, Eli sat in his apartment, staring at the city lights outside his window. His hands shook as he called home. Nana picked up after 3 rings. "Baby, that you?" He swallowed. "Yeah, Grandma, it's me. You sound tired." "I am." She could always hear what he didn't say. "You found something you don't like, didn't you?" He exhaled. "They're not what they seem. None of it is." "Then what are you gonna do about it?" "I don't know." "Yes you do. Her voice was calm, steady. You always know. You just forget to trust yourself. He pressed the phone to his forehead, eyes burning. If I speak out, I lose everything. The scholarship, the future, the Center for Hollow Pine. And if you stay quiet, she asked softly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Baby, she said finally, sometimes God gives you a platform not to stand higher, but to be heard farther. Don't waste your voice whispering. 2 days later, Eli didn't show up to work. Instead, he went to the foundation's press conference, a sleek ballroom filled with reporters and cameras. The Whitfields stood at the podium, smiling graciously, the blue and gold logo shining behind them. Henry was midway through his speech about empowering the underprivileged through opportunity when Eli stepped into the aisle. At first nobody noticed, then he moved closer, his voice loud, clear, trembling but unbroken. You call it empowerment, he said, but you're building wealth on people's homes. You're not saving communities, you're replacing them. Gasps rippled through the crowd, cameras turned. Henry froze at the podium, his smile cracking like glass. Mr. Thompson, he said sharply, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time, Eli said. You tested my kindness once. Now I'm testing yours. Security began moving, but Clara raised a hand, her eyes kind, sad, met Eli's across the room. She whispered something to Henry, then looked back at Eli and nodded, almost imperceptibly, as if saying go on. Eli turned to the reporters. The Whitfield Foundation talks about compassion, but every act of charity they make comes with a profit margin. They call it investment. I call it betrayal. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat pocket, the internal report he'd copied before resigning. This is the Hollow Pine Initiative, my home, my grandmother's home. They plan to level it, call it progress. I call it theft. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the room erupted, questions shouted, flashes blinding. Henry's voice rose over it, commanding, furious, but Eli was already walking out the back door into the cold. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, steady, endless. He took a deep breath, tasting the air. For the first time in months, it felt like home. That night, Eli sat by the river, watching the city lights shimmer across the water. His phone buzzed with dozens of missed calls, Mr. Reed, reporters, even Clara. He ignored them all. Then one final text came through, from Nana Ruth. I saw you on the news. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. Come home, baby. It's time. He smiled through tears. He didn't try to hide. In the distance, church bells rang over the city, slow and solemn, like a benediction. He stood, buttoned his coat, and whispered into the wind, I'm coming home. When Eli stepped off the bus in Hollow Pine 2 days before Christmas, the world seemed quieter, like even the wind was holding its breath. Snow blanketed the roofs and trees, smoothing every rough edge the town used to wear so proudly. The lampposts were wrapped in garlands, the church bells ringing faintly in the distance. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed that sound. The air smelled like pine and chimney smoke, familiar, real. He walked the last stretch toward Elm Street, with his duffel slung over his shoulder, the foundation's sleek city coat traded for his old denim jacket. His boots crunched on the frozen ground. When he saw his grandmother's house, still standing, yellow paint faded but stubbornly bright, he stopped. The porch light was on, and in the window he could see her, Nana Ruth. She was sitting in her chair, knitting the same scarf she'd been working on when he left. A small radio hummed beside her, playing Christmas hymns older than both of them. When she looked up and saw him through the glass, she froze. Then she smiled, slow, wide, luminous. Eli barely made it through the door before she was up and holding him, her thin arms surprisingly strong. You came home, she whispered. I told you I would. She leaned back, studying his face. You look older. Feels like I aged 10 years in 6 months. That's how truth works, she said softly. Burns you down to who you really are. He laughed, but there was a weight in his chest that laughter couldn't shake. I think I just started a war, Grandma. I know, she said simply. I watched it. Of course she had. The clip had been all over the news. Foundation whistleblower accuses Whitfields of exploitation. The video showed him standing in the ballroom, voice steady, eyes bright. In some corners of the internet, he was already being called the Christmas Kid. But not all the headlines were kind. Some called him ungrateful. Some said he'd thrown away the opportunity of a lifetime. He hadn't expected any of it. Now sitting at the kitchen table, drinking tea that tasted like home, he tried to explain it all. They were going to bulldoze this town, Grandma. Replace people's homes with development centers they could control. The same foundation that talked about community was planning to erase one. Nana listened quietly, her needles moving rhythmically, and now they're denying everything, saying I misunderstood, that I'm just a kid. They tried to help. He looked down at his hands. Maybe I did ruin my future. She set the knitting down. You didn't ruin anything. You revealed something. That's always harder, but it's always better. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. The old house creaked like it was listening. The next morning, Hollow Pine woke to news vans and flashing lights. Word had spread. Local boy exposes billionaires. The town's diner buzzed with speculation. Kid's a hero, some said. Kid's a fool, others muttered. But no one could ignore what was happening. Henry and Clara Whitfield had gone silent. Their PR team issued careful statements, but the damage was already done. Investigations were opening, journalists were digging, donors were calling for transparency. And in Hollow Pine, something unexpected began to happen. Neighbors stopped waiting for rescue. Big Mike from the hardware store started fixing roofs for free, saying, if they won't build for us, we'll build for each other. Mrs. Patterson reopened the shuttered library, teaching reading classes in the evenings. Teenagers who'd once hung around the empty lots started cleaning them up, painting benches, setting up Christmas lights, strung from lamppost to lamppost. By Christmas Eve, the town glowed, not from wealth or charity, but from its own stubborn light. That night the diner was full. People came not just for food, but for warmth, conversation, connection. The bell above the door jingled constantly. Eli stood behind the counter, refilling mugs, taking plates, moving like he'd never left. It felt right, hands busy, heart steady. Didn't think I'd see you back here, Big Mike said, clapping him on the shoulder. Didn't think I'd be back, Eli admitted. Mike grinned. Town's been better since you stirred things up. You know that, right? Eli smiled faintly. Maybe people just needed a reason. Mike leaned closer. Maybe people needed someone who reminded them who they were. Before Eli could answer, the door opened again. The bell chimed softly, and every sound in the diner seemed to fade. Two figures stepped inside. Henry and Clara Whitfield, not in suits this time. No press, no cameras, just coats, scarves, and eyes that looked older than he remembered. The room went still. Henry removed his hat, scanning the space, until his gaze landed on Eli. Then he walked forward slowly, deliberately, the way a man does when he's carrying something heavy that can't be seen. Mr. Thompson, he said when he reached the counter. His voice was quieter now, the authority gone. May we sit? Eli nodded once. Booth by the window. They sat. He followed, coffee pot in hand. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. Probably not, Henry admitted, but some things shouldn't be said through lawyers. He poured them both coffee, the smell rising between them like peace smoke. Clara was the first to speak. We deserved what you did, she said softly. But not because we were villains, because we forgot why we started. Eli frowned. Henry stared into his cup. When we began the foundation, it was about people, then it became about numbers. Somewhere along the way, I started mistaking control for care. Clara added, you reminded us of that. Publicly, yes, but sometimes shame is just truth catching up. Eli leaned back. Then why try to destroy me in the press? Henry looked pained. Reflex. When you've lived too long in power, you forget how to lose gracefully. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the snow began to fall again, slow and steady. Finally Henry reached into his coat pocket, and placed a folded paper on the table. It was a letter, foundation letterhead, signed and stamped. Eli hesitated before opening it. Effective immediately, the Whitfield Foundation is transferring ownership and full operational authority of the Hollow Pine redevelopment project to the Hollow Pine Community Trust, under the leadership of Eli Thompson and appointed local board members. His throat tightened. What is this? Our atonement, Henry said. You were right. The town should belong to its people, not us. Eli's hands shook slightly. You're giving it up, giving it back, Clara corrected gently. We'll still fund it, but you'll decide how it's built, who it helps, how it grows. No cameras, no control, just trust. Eli stared at them, searching for deception, but saw none, only exhaustion. Why? He asked finally. Henry's eyes softened. The same blue that had once looked through him like glass, now looked almost human. Because I realized something after that night in the diner. We weren't testing you, we were being tested by you. He smiled faintly, almost self-mocking. And we failed. Clara reached across the table, resting a gloved hand on his. Don't let our mistakes make you bitter. This world needs people who believe goodness can still win. The bell above the door jingled again. Someone shouted from across the diner. Snow's picking up. Eli, you closing early? Eli glanced outside. The flakes were thickening, drifting like confetti, through the yellow glow of the streetlight. He turned back to them. You staying in town tonight? Henry shook his head. We'll be leaving in the morning, but we'd like to make one stop first. Where? Henry's expression softened. To meet your grandmother. The walk back to Elm Street was quiet. Snow muffled every sound but their footsteps. When they reached the porch, Nana was already waiting by the door, shawl wrapped tight, eyes bright as candlelight. So, she said when Henry approached, you're the ones who tried to buy my grandson's soul. Henry froze, then bowed his head slightly. Guilty, ma'am. She studied him a long moment before smiling faintly. At least you know it. Clara stepped forward, her voice gentle. He has your strength. No, Nana said, glancing toward Eli. He's stronger. He remembered who he was when the world told him to forget. They sat in the small living room, the wood stove crackling softly, the tree in the corner decorated with mismatched ornaments from decades past. Henry looked around quietly. You've done a lot with little. We always have, Nana said, because little's enough when people share. Henry nodded, then looked at Eli. You've built something I couldn't, a community that believes in itself. Eli looked down, embarrassed. It's not me, it's them. They're the ones rebuilding. That's what leadership looks like, Henry said. He rose, walked to the window, staring out at the falling snow. You were right about us, about everything, but you were wrong about one thing. Eli frowned. What's that? Henry turned, smiling faintly. You thought we were testing you. Truth is you were the test, and we're the ones still learning. Clara stood beside him, slipping an envelope into Eli's hand. For the new community center, she said. It's not charity, it's investment, in people who deserve to be trusted. Eli opened it after they left. Inside was a check made out to Hollow Pine Community Trust for $10 million. He laughed, shaking his head. You can't teach billionaires subtlety. Nana smiled from her chair. Maybe that's God's way of making sure you can't say no. Christmas morning came wrapped in quiet magic. The town gathered in the square under the biggest tree Hollow Pine had ever seen. The diner had donated hot chocolate. Kids ran through the snow, their laughter echoing off brick walls that hadn't felt joy in years. Eli stood at the front with Big Mike, Mrs. Patterson, and a handful of neighbors, now officially the new board of the Hollow Pine Community Trust. The banner above them read, Building Home Together. Reporters came, of course, but this time, the story wasn't about scandal. It was about resurrection. When the cameras turned to Eli, he didn't give a speech, he just told the truth. 6 months ago, I thought kindness was a small thing, something you gave away in quiet moments when no one noticed. But I learned that kindness, when shared, becomes a force. It doesn't just change people, it rebuilds places. He paused, his breath clouding in the air. This town taught me that home isn't walls or streets or money. It's people who show up when everything falls apart. It's what we choose to build together. Applause spread slowly, then all at once, snow began to fall again, soft, light, endless. That evening, Eli and Nana walked home arm in arm. The town glowed behind them, laughter spilling into the night. As they reached their porch, Nana looked up at the sky. You think those rich folks ever stop testing people? Eli smiled. Maybe they will, or maybe that's the point. What point? He looked at her, eyes glinting. That life keeps testing us, until we prove what we already know. They stepped inside, the warmth wrapping around them like memory. On the table sat the napkin, the one from that night months ago. The ink had faded, but the words still shone under the lamplight. Kindness is currency. You've just made your first investment. Eli picked it up, smiled and whispered, guess it's still paying dividends. Outside, Hollow Pine slept under its blanket of snow. The wind hummed through the pines like a hymn. Somewhere church bells rang midnight, and inside a small yellow house on Elm Street, the boy who once gave away his only meal, sat beside the woman who taught him how to love, watching the light of their town flicker through the frost.
proof that sometimes the smallest act of kindness really can change the world.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.